Hello, this is Mike Bikes 403 back with another video on Stromer service. This time is actually going to cover preventative maintenance, and the models covered are going to be the ST1X, both 6 and 12 volts, the ST2 and the ST2S, non-belt drive bikes, and the ST3 chain drive, and the ST5. This will also include the ABS model as well, pre-belt drive. Now, one of the common issues with these bikes is you'll see controller issues and phase cable issues. And part of that reason is you've got this plastic heatsink cover underneath the bike, and it's actually not weatherproof or insulated at all. And the connectors for your phase cable to your controller right back here are not weatherproof at all. So typically over time you can accumulate, salt, foreign materials inside your frame, and that can actually hit your phase cables and ruin your bike, and then you're stuck replacing your controller, phase cables. Sometimes shops won't replace both, and what happens is you'll have a slightly defective phase cable, you'll put a new controller in the bike, and the controller will break down again. So this will actually help mitigate any of those issues. Now, the tools you'll need for the job are pretty simple. So most people, you'll have your common heat shrink around. This, I use clear silicone just to seal the heatsink cover off. And this tool here is very helpful for removing the screws inside of the battery box. Now, the screws you'll want to remove, I've already removed 6 of them. And those ones are from the top right here, here, and here. Now, you'll notice there's 8 screws in total on the bottom, but only 6 of them hold the battery box in place. So this one and this one are for your battery box. This one is for your battery box as well, and these ones are for your battery box. These 2 here actually go through the battery box, so you'll actually notice they're not holding the battery box in place at all. And they are actually just holding your controller in, which is right underneath here. So we're going to go ahead and remove that battery box from the bike, and I'll show you a trick to actually get the battery box out, because it can be a little tricky sometimes. I do apologize for the audio quality. My microphone has still not shown up. Alright, so I've gone ahead and just removed the screws off of the bike here. And I'm going to show you all something here. So every single set of screws that are in the battery box are a different size. So if we actually line the camera up here, you'll see that they gradually get shorter. So the large set is from the front, this set is from the middle, and then the very small screws are from the back of the battery box. So the long ones here, the medium-sized ones here, and the small ones there. And I recommend just lining up the screws in order, that way you don't get them mixed up. The ones that are in the top of the battery box are all the same size. So if you throw them in a magnetic bowl like I do, you're not going to mix any of them up. So once you have those 6 screws removed, your heatsink cover is going to come off the bike. And we'll actually show you the controller, which is right here. So you got all these connectors and whatnot down here, but the big problem point is going to be these phase cables right here. So the easiest way to kind of pull the battery box is I just put my fingers behind this little plastic tab where the front base is. Just kind of pull it a little bit. Sometimes it needs a little bit of encouragement to get out. So I'm gonna just put the camera down and pull the battery box out. And I might actually use a little. So this is your battery box right here. So what I do is I'll typically just keep this out of the way, you can zip tie it. You can zip tie it upwards just to kind of keep it from falling. Sometimes I'll lower the bike and or I'll just kind of angle your wheel and I'll prop it here. That way you don't have to disconnect it. Just keep in mind, you don't ever want to disconnect the battery door, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. So just like my last video, you're going to want I'm just going to use a little spoke that I keep around and disconnect the battery door. So just like that, your battery door is disconnected, and we can actually see the phase cables. So your phase cables are going to be right there. There's these 3 red connectors right there. That's 1, 2, 3. So typically what happens is debris will come in through the bottom right here. Kind of fills up this area, and if we kind of pull these forward, you'll see that these are not weatherproofed at all. And once you get a foreign material in there, your bike will not run anymore. And then you're looking at a controller replacement, which is costly, or a phase cable replacement. When this happens, I actually recommend doing both. So this is where the duct tape the electrical tape comes in handy. So what we're gonna do is, just to keep this a simple kind of repair, we are going to put electrical tape on all these connectors, because more often than not, it's easier to get your hands on electrical tape than it is adhesive heat shrink. Now there is an even easier way to address the phase cable connections, and that's actually if you remove your horn cover as well. So this right here is the cover for the horn, and these are 2 mil Allen keys, I believe. And so we're gonna pull that off, and what we're gonna do is just back the phase cable connectors down through here, tape them off here, and then put them back inside the bike. So I'm gonna actually show you a little close-up of the phase cables and what I mean by they are not weatherproof. So I've pulled off the bottom cover of the horn here. You'll actually see right here, my camera's having a hard time focusing on this, but this here is actually exposed wire, and so is that. So what happens is, when all that debris gets inside of your bike, get inside the connector, then boom, error codes, and before you know it, you're looking at almost $2,000 repair if your bike is not in warranty. So I'm gonna quickly just get some electrical tape around these connectors. And again, you can use electrical tape. You can use adhesive heat shrink if you want. I recommend just something adhesive, because it will actually help with keeping water and other contaminants out of the frame of the bike. So I'm gonna go and get this done, and then we'll be right back. So now we've put our electrical tape around all the connectors here. Again, you want it on nice and tight. You wanna make sure it's sealed, and that will keep your connections tight, and it will keep them sealed away from any outdoor elements. And this is just a precaution, because what we're going to do next is actually going to seal off the controller completely. So what we're going to do, you just push these back up in here. And now we're ready to start reassembling the bike. So I'm gonna quickly cut the camera, get all these screws back in, and we're gonna come back, silicone the bike. Or actually, I'll keep the camera running. So the first thing we're gonna do is put the horn cover back on the bike. Now with the horn cover back on, we can put the battery box back in. And the reason you want to put the battery box back in before you put the heatsink cover on is because the heatsink cover connects to the screws that run through the battery box. So we're going to reconnect this. Now your battery box is back in. Now this tool here that I was using to actually remove the battery box is actually something I recommend having. Just this piece here, you can buy it at any hardware store. For me, I got these at Home Depot. What I do is I'll actually start to hand screw this heatsink cover back in first. So I'll get the first two screws from the front. And just get them in enough to hold the battery box in. And then I will start the center one. And now I'll snug up all the screws. You're going to want to make sure that these screws are tight but not too tight, because what can happen is if you over torque them, it can pull the screws through the battery box, permanently damage it. So just snug them up enough to have everything tight, but not so tight that the screws will pull through the box. Then we'll put these two screws in last. So these ones are a bit of a reach, so I'll drop them on here first. Then into the back of the bike. And I dropped it. So this is going to be a bit of a fight, but I'm going to cut the camera, come back, and I'll explain to you how I get these in. You can also just use a standard number 4 Allen key, but I'm using this tool because once I get them into place, I can just spin the screws in. So I will be right back. So now the battery box is back in. Everything's snugged up nice and tight. We are going to silicone, just put a small bead of silicone around the entire heatsink cover. Now, you don't have to put a ton on, but if you do, it doesn't have to look pretty. You can also get a smaller single-use tube as well. I have this one because I work on a lot of bikes. And this stuff here actually does dry clear, so you don't have to worry about it being white or looking odd. So first, Then what I'll do to just kind of reach in behind here is I just put a little bit of the silicone on my finger. Now wipe around the back. And before I clean it up, and the reason I got the white silicone that actually dries to clear is so on camera you could actually see where you want to seal it, and then we just start to clean up the bead here, and we'll wipe off the excess on the frame, and I'll clean up the heatsink cover. I'll clean up the rest once I'm off camera, but just like that, your Stromer is completely weatherproof now from damage to your controller and damage to your motor phase cables. Now, again, this service will work on all ST1Xs in 6 volt, 12 volt, ST2 chain drives in 6 volt, and the ST2S, which is 12 volt. The ST3 chain drive and the ST5 chain drives, and that also includes the ABS that came out just before the Pinion did. You don't have to go and clean up all the silicone after. If you put a nice bead on, just set it and forget it. You do want to give it time to dry. And again, doing this will cut down the amount of issues you have with your Stromer considerably. Beyond that, the other thing you do want to do is check your motor cable regularly and just make sure it hasn't come loose, because this being a higher speed bike, this cable can try and back itself off. This is just a screw on, so just check it every now and again and make sure it's tight. As long as your motor cable's tight, this is sealed, and you seal off your phase cables, you will not have as many issues with the bike. It's going to dramatically cut down the issues you have with your controller, the amount of issues you have with your phase cable. If you've already had an issue with your bike where contaminants have got into the frame and affected your controller down here, I highly recommend replacing your phase cable with the controller at the same time to prevent premature damage. But that's all for this video. We will have more service videos coming up in the future, just around the ST1Xs, ST2s, 3s, and 5s, because that's a majority of the bikes that are on the road right now. We will move into some Pinion stuff very soon, but I do have other brands of bikes that I need to cover as well, so there will be a bit of a break in the Stromer videos here and there. But for now, this is Mike Bikes 403. I'm here with Amego Electric Vehicles in Calgary, Alberta. We also have 2 locations in Toronto. And that's it. Any suggestions for videos, any comments, post them below. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And again, drop a comment, and we'll make a video on ways to weatherproof your bikes, ways to improve your Stromers, and ways to repair them yourself. This is, again, Mike Bikes 403 signing off. Have a great day.